Zachary Hyde, how are you? Thanks for joining me today.
Good. Thanks for having me, David.
So what is copywriting?
You could ask 40 people and you'd get probably 40 different answers. Some people think it's writing content. Some people think it's working on branding and messaging, and all of those are pertinent and they play into the big picture for a business with their copywriting, but that's not necessarily it. Copywriting, for me, as a conversion copywriter, in the simplest terms, I'm the one businesses come to when they want to make more money. That's the easiest way to put it, whether it's through email marketing, website copy, handling product launches and sales funnels, things like that. That's really what defines my space in the copywriting arena.
And speaking of marketing and content creation, things have really changed in the past several years. The medium is the message, right? Things have moved towards even TikTok, YouTube Shorts, but there is still a place for content that's been meticulously written and not by AI. Any comments on this?
So AI it's definitely a touchy topic in the writer's arena. I personally love AI for some of the features that it does. I typically come with a pretty hefty price tag, but that doesn't come time-based. That comes based off of experience and the results. And AI, it really plays a part in cutting down that time of the more tedious, monotonous tasks that don't go into actually writing good copy. For example, I'm a huge fan of using GPT for things like analysis and gathering resources. No writing. I don't foresee any good writing quality coming from it anytime soon. It is good for that analysis and that data collection and cutting down basically the tasks. If I ran an agency that I would give to a junior copywriter to say, hey, generate me 100 headlines of just something to go off of. And then as the senior, as the one actually producing the working product, I would refine that and actually use the voice of customer data that I pulled in. But it definitely helps cut down on the time to do my job. So I definitely think AI is a necessity as a tool for writers. I think the fear of it replacing our jobs, everybody's job can be replaceable at some point. I don't think it is a viable option for companies who want to be taken seriously with their content. So yeah, definitely it's on my bar here. I go to it multiple times a day to help me out with what I'm doing to cut things down. But yeah, it's a long way off from ever replacing good copywriters and content writers. Yeah.
Where does copywriting falls within the whole realm of marketing and demand generation? Because there's different silos. When a company looks at the marketing budget, whether it's a vendor or enterprise, whatever the case may be, they have different silos where they say, okay, this is how much money we're going to put into demand generation as a whole, maybe. And then it includes like field marketing, includes generation of content, includes generation of brochures, includes generation of even videos, whatever the case may be. So where does copywriting specifically falls within each of these categories? And in your experience, does that fall within specific marketing silos, or does it apply to the whole messaging as a whole for the company?
It really applies to the whole messaging. In fact, a lot of times I see with vendors I work with is they try to silo it too much in the marketing and the sales doesn't get any input, right? I reached out to a sales rep on LinkedIn a few days ago and said, hey, I have this newsletter that goes out daily to help with your copywriting. And he responded back and said, hey, that's good, but I'm just a sales guy. I don't handle any of this. And that was a huge thing I see. That's a disconnect I see in companies where they say, hey, marketing, you're going to handle all the messaging, and sales, you gather the customer input. And there's no real connection there. And a lot of times what drives me as a conversion copywriter is that data, right? I have to go to sales. I have to see what the customer's saying in the surveys and the customer reviews. All of that drives that conversion rate. Now you have different forms of copywriters. You have the direct response, you have the long form content writers who do blogs and articles, white papers, case studies, things like that. And depending on, like I said, who you talk to in the industry, we'll see them as copywriters, and some say, no, that's not copywriting, that's content writing. But ultimately, it falls in, I would say, to both of those silos. One big thing I deal with vendors is who come to me, a lot of inbound referrals come to me and they say, hey, I need help with our branding or our messaging. And that is absolutely not copywriting. That is something that has to be established before you even get to me. And I recommend brand strategists and messaging strategists to lay that out. But at the end of the day, my job really is just to write the words, whether they're going to be in that brochure, whether they're going to be on the website. Even if I write a script for a YouTube video or a TikTok video or a LinkedIn ad, all of that has one purpose, and that is just to generate those conversions. And taking that from both marketing and sales is an absolute must in order for that to be accomplished.
And there's so many, Zachary, there's so many things to unravel here. And if you don't mind, I'll double click on a couple of things you mentioned. Yep. First, I would say, talking about brand and identity, I think there's an identity crisis to a lot of these vendors out there. I think they don't exactly know what it is that they want to convey as a brand. And I don't know if you can agree or disagree with me, and then maybe expand on what your thoughts are about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking specifically like cybersecurity vendors, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity and in general, tech as a whole.
Tech as a whole. Yeah, we really have this. There are so many marketing heads out there now that have just like the absolute answer for how you success in marketing your product. In cybersecurity specifically, I joke about it, but really it is serious in that cybersecurity professionals really suck at speaking human on a basic human level. We're prone to overcomplicate things, and we say, hey, if this is simple, then it's not going to work. This was true 10 years ago when I sat in the CISO seat. For 4.5 years, I sat in that seat. And out of all the things that I did in that job, all the things that stressed me out, what made it worse was dealing with vendors who could not communicate on just a basic level. Because at the end of the day, I didn't control the purse strings. I didn't make the purchasing decisions. I had to convince somebody who probably didn't have the technical experience to buy out on this product and protect the organization. And if it failed, it was because I failed to convey it. And so today, vendors, as we're talking about that brand identity, it really is about strategic partnership. And it's not strategic partnership in a sense of really pitching this product really heavy to the CISO. It's helping that CISO sell it to the CEO, the COO, the CIO, or the board who makes these buying decisions. So definitely across the spectrum of the B2B tech industry, like I said, there's just so many marketing heads out there giving all this advice, and it's becoming viral on LinkedIn, on TikTok, and all these conferences. You go to a conference and everybody's, hey, this worked, and I made X amount of money. But at the end of the day, I tell people, every piece of advice you get for your brand on LinkedIn or from any of these conferences is 100% wrong if you didn't go to your customer and derive it from them. All right, your customers in this industry, there's not really any other industry like cybersecurity specifically where the customers are begging you to tell them what to say, right? They're giving you exactly what they want to hear. But again, cybersecurity professionals and even going into the B2B SaaS and tech, we're like, that's too easy. We can't go that route. We have to overcomplicate it. We got to throw in these buzzwords and this jargon to puff it up and make us look good. When in reality, all you got to do is communicate it on a basic business level of what the benefits are of buying the product. And in copywriting, that's really what I do a lot of, is going through vendors who say, hey, we've got high bounce rates on our websites. Our emails are getting blacklisted or sent to spam or nobody's responding. And then I look at them and say, who are you trying to talk to here? You're writing messaging that you like to hear, but you're not writing it. You're not identifying with something that the customer can relate to.
And I still don't understand why is it so tough. They teach you in sales and marketing, like trying to get into the buyer's persona, buyer's shoes, and see what their problems are. And then what you do is you tailor the messaging and the benefits to what it is that they're looking for. And it sounds to me that the mismatch, a particular mismatch of what you pointed out as that they are catering to the benefits, what they think the benefits are to the organization, the problem they want to solve. And yet what you're describing is all the times as a CISO, you're not necessarily looking strictly at the issue. You're looking at the ability to take and articulate the issue and the solution more to the other people on the team or the board of directors, whoever is signing the dotted line. And so what essentially you need to do is you need to help them be able to articulate the solution in a very simple manner to people that are not necessarily technical. Is that correct? So it's not an easy enough job.
Yeah, absolutely. But you look at like the traditional like marketing 101 is let's build this user persona. And how does that happen? We go to Google Images and we pull down a stock image and we say, hey, this is Bob. He's a 55-year-old Caucasian male.
Joe or Joanne from...
He lives in Chicago. He takes Yell every morning because his Volvo breaks down. And that's good and all if you're a Volvo salesman, but you're not asking the real hard question and seeing what's really under the surface. One of the things that I harp on that I was taught was you go into an interview or you go into a conversation with one of your buyers and you ask them strictly what's on your mind. And that first answer they give you is not the right one. They give you that answer and you say, okay, what else? And you make them break it down a little further. And then you realize it's not about Bob writing the L because his Volvo doesn't work. It's Bob sleeps on the couch every night because his wife resents him because he's stressed about the job and his boss isn't listening to him. And you say, okay, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of what we need to touch on here. And yeah, definitely trying to communicate that with them, specifically in an industry where, CISOs have experienced this long-term poor marketing strategy from vendors. And so they have a negative connotation going into it. That's why so many of them, they push back and they say, hey, like I already associate a vendor with a sales pitch. And it's a challenge to come back from that. Maybe if we had started off on the right foot, marketing to these individuals, we wouldn't see that. But nowadays, it's already, the marketers behind us are already set to start at ground zero with these folks. So it's one of those things, like I said, that it's really not hard. It's just human interaction, being a basic human being and not expecting anything, just speaking out and saying, hey, how can I help you? What are your real problems that you're dealing with in your organization on a security level? And saying, hey, this is what we can offer. Or being humble enough to say, hey, we can't offer you that right now, but somebody over here can, who is a better solution. And that right then and there is a surefire way to build trust, whether you make that sale or not. It's like I said, it's just really the difficult task of functioning at a basic human level instead of trying to sell a product.
And you touch upon one of the key components of why it's so difficult these days, the contentious relationship between vendors and industry that I think was caused for a slew of different reasons. One is like almost like a scorched earth mentality where getting bombarded, it's all transactional, right? As you mentioned, the basic human being providing value is sometimes people forgot. We're humans, a human on the other side, and we are humans. And then combine that with automation, all these tools that bombard you with these laconic messages and they load you into a sequence. And before you know it, you're 20 messages deep without actually looking at what it is that you're actually looking for or what the issues are or whether if it's even relevant to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we, again, it's one thing to, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, and I was going to say that's another thing with the industry right now is an extreme shift in the opposite direction and saying, okay, we've tainted the industry by pushing marketing and our product so hard that now we want to go this wholly altruistic mission over profits route and not sell anything. And it's that CISO is protecting an organization that sells a product that makes money. All right. You don't have to go the route of self-flagellation and beating yourself up and bowing down. You pedestalize these folks and say we've got to make up the difference with that. And you can't go one extreme or another. You have to find that balance of saying, hey, we're not going to come off as strictly a salesman, but yeah, we have an offer. We have something to pitch you. And working with me as a CISO, as long as you came prepared, as long as you had done your research and you legitimately had something that could help me, I was going to give you the time of day. And I think a lot will. But you definitely do have those ones who are like, I don't have the time for this. It's just a sales pitch. And they're getting their info, from their various Slack channels, the CISO dark recesses of the internet. But you can't try to make up for this overbearing, pitch-laden, environment by completely taking it out and saying we're not going to sell anything. Because at that point, it tells me, like, what value do I have in it? You want people to use something and value it, charge them for it. You don't give it away for free. And so you definitely have to find, like I said, that balance for your success.
And speaking of success, one of the issues was as well as the way the success was measured. MQL, marketing qualified leads, was just either a scan of a badge or a click of an email.
Yep.
No one was actually looking for meaningful interactions, which again caused skewed of and fueling of this whole industry of massive amount of automation and how many touch points, as if like the other side is just some machine that needs to be beat up to submission.
Yeah.
I hope we're moving away from that, but again, I think that taking the red pill and moving into the Tibet monastery of marketing, that's not a good either.
Yeah. You really touch on something. Going to the various conferences, RSA, TechNet down in Augusta, all different ones. Customers are coming up. They got that swag bag. They want to come up and get your T-shirt or your lanyard, or they want to play with your cool stuff, and that's prime opportunity to have that engagement. And a lot, like you said, they're like, here, let me scan your badge, throw your email on this list, and then we're going to throw you into this generic automated nightmare, right? I make the joke that like most vendors, their email sequences are like a 0-day attack. They're unpredictable and they're destructive. They do more damage than good. So
Zachary, I have to tell you that is so spot on. And it's funny, it doesn't stop until you actually say something. It keeps you in that sequence. Unless you say something, it will go another 25 deep messages, and then you just don't. And I've had cases where, hey, I'm in this sequence. Why didn't you just? I don't answer. Oh, because he didn't answer. It kept going. That's what I received as the other.
Yeah, and I had sat down with the chief communications officer of a big vendor in December to discuss white papers, and I'll use this as an example. And they had gated their white papers on their website behind an opt-in form. So I gave my email to get this white paper to see what kind of content they were producing before I went into this. And now I get this email from them, every week or so. There's no strategy there. It's just chaotic, goes different directions. Nobody from the company, even, just doing it to see the product, nobody from the company reached out and said, hey, what is it you're looking for? What can we help you with? It was just, hey, we're going to throw you into this daily or this weekly newsletter of random assortment of stuff that you didn't ask for. And I keep it because I pull it up and I use it occasionally in my emails and say, hey, look, this is awful.
Exactly. The worst pet peeve is to even be able to opt out. Sometimes it's easy. You just click on opt out and it opts you out. But sometimes it's sneaky.
Yeah.
It asks you, first of all, it gives you a whole list of 25 items where you have to unchoose the 25. And then, if that's not enough, it has to ask you which email. You have to manually enter the email. Now, as we have multiple emails that we use. So I have to go back and figure out which email was it sent to. and then manually type my email, hoping that I don't make a spelling mistake, because then after that, it even sneakier, when you see click unsubscribe, it sends you this image, and there's another button there,
Yeah.
and actually says subscribe. So you might double click on it quickly, maybe on the phone or whatever, so not able to see it as clearly, and then you're going to be subscribing again, just completely by mistake. Everything is done by design.
Yeah, and what's funny is the vendor I'm talking about, they sent me an email a couple weeks ago, and they were like, "Hey, click here to download this year's comprehensive threat report." And I was like, "Oh, let's see what it is." And I clicked it, took me to another landing page, and they wanted me to put my email in again. It's you just emailed me. You're creating friction. And even if this was if the copywriter did his job and wrote this email in a way that I was like, I absolutely have to have this. That time it took me to go to a landing page and re-enter my information, that's time for me to say, you know what? I got to go make.
They thought you were a bot.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And like you said, yeah, for the unsubscribed, you're looking at, they almost are upselling you to unsubscribe. So it should be a frictionless point. And coming from my background, it looks needy. It looks like, hey, we really need you here. Not obviously not enough to communicate with you and target you, segment you out, and give you something of value. But we need you enough that we're going to make you waste another 5 minutes going through opt-ins and opt-outs to even get off the list.
And I have to tell you, everything is an opportunity in the digital world. Every interaction gives the end user a sense of what the company is. Mm-hmm. And banks do this really well. They figure out that because you don't necessarily go to the bank anymore. You don't go to the branch. So how you interact with a mobile app, that digital experience is all you got. Mm-hmm. So my point is, if all I have, my minimal interaction with your company is even how I opt out, mm-hmm. and it's sneaky and it's difficult, what do you think my impression of your company, even in that simple moment that I interact with your company through the opt-out email mechanism, how do you think it makes me feel?
Yeah, I mean, you destroy that trust and you destroy the image of that brand. Absolutely. You have to think, if this is a company that I'm trusting to handle my cybersecurity or the next big, SaaS app that we want to integrate, you're making it this difficult to even opt out of an email. How difficult is it going to be for my employees to use your app? How difficult is it going to be for my customers to integrate into this? And like you said, it's a very big, that's your selling point right there. It's definitely, that's prime real estate to show, hey, like, one, we're not needy. If you want to opt out, you can opt out, come back anytime. We'll be happy to have you. We're going to make this difficult process. And then in return, we're going to instill the fear that this is just going to be life with you if we choose to come back and implement your solution.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I want to just come back to something you mentioned specifically, your interaction with a salesperson within the company. Mm-hmm. My opinion is every touch point, whether it's with the main line, whether it's with a salesperson, whether it is with the HR, whether it's with a supplier, it doesn't matter. That interaction is, again, because we have so limited interaction with companies, every interaction like that is an opportunity to shine. And in this particular case, it was an absolute fail. The salesperson could have done multitude different things to make you feel appreciated, because you don't know where you're coming from. You may be in contact with potential clients. You may be a potential buyer down the road. Again, this is moving away from the scorched earth next quarter to longer term value, appreciation, to we're all humans, empathy, and so on.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, and it's understandable to a certain degree that a large scale organization, a lot of these B2B cybersecurity firms and even some of these B2B SaaS companies personalization, it can start to feel canned and it can start to feel inauthentic. And so it's unrealistic to expect you to be able to, every time you get somebody subscribing, I need to personalize a message directly for this person or this organization. However, it's super easy to draft up a quick survey, send it out in your email and say, hey, saw that you signed up. Which one of these features is more aligned with what you're looking for, so we can make sure that we are communicating something of value to you. And companies underestimate how many people actually want to complete those surveys. Yeah, some are going to be like, nah, I don't want to take the time. But if they actually came there looking for value and you take the time to just send something quick, 3 or 4 options and say, hey, choose the right one. And then once they answer, that segments them out. And now they're only getting emails or messaging directly related to that offer. They're not getting, I come to a company, I'm like, hey, I'm looking for something to secure my endpoints. And they come back to me and they're like, hey, let's talk about how to improve the life of your SOC analyst. And that's not what my SOC analyst is over here just fine. That's not what I'm looking for, a specific technical solution right now. So just getting away from saying, hey, we've got to personalize we'll put a merge field in there that says, hey, first name, and we'll leave it at that. That's not personalization. That's not authentic. But don't take that out.
Then, by the way, there's a lot of times the automation fail.
Yeah.
I've seen those emails where somebody posted out and say, hello, first name.
Yeah. And it is authentic. It's inauthentic. It may work in more like B2C or direct to consumer brands that are very personal, but in the B2B industry, it doesn't work. And you can see in my emails, I never use salutations. I love merge fields. I do a lot of storytelling in my emails, and I like to throw people in there and get them involved. But I send out a lot of emails, and it would be inauthentic to say, hey, David, hey, so-and-so, because I'm not speaking directly to you. I am realistically speaking to hundreds of people, and companies understand that and say, hey, we're going to take out the canned responses and we're going to just get down on a real level and say, hey, what are you interested in? Tell us, and we'll send only that material to you. And that's really how they can nail down that personalization and do better.
And that was always best practice. I know for a fact that a good salesperson, before they enter a meeting, first they do the research. Secondly, they spend the first few minutes of any type of sales call discussing the expectation from the client, what it is that they want to see, what it is that they care about. And then they typically only go to those sections. So they don't start like talking about, spending 25 minutes out of the 45 minutes that they have talking about things the customers don't care about. So it's best practice. So why are we not doing this, as you mentioned, in the kind of the written communication through emails or other communication? Why are we neglecting that piece?
I think it's just what's the word? Complacency. And you take a company like who I was dealing with in that previously mentioned example, we've got 4,000, 5,000 customers, and we've got those 5,000 customers. We're a company worth $84 billion US dollars. Our name's big enough. We don't have to do that personalization. We don't have to spend the time for our salespeople because we've established ourselves. And I made a comment about this a little while back on LinkedIn where I've never met somebody who said, I've made $84 billion. I don't think I need any more money. I don't think I need to make any more sales. Like nobody, if you want to be a productive business, you need to make more money. And if you have got to a point where you think you're so big that you can get complacent on those basics, those sales basics, like you mentioned, that are best practice, because you think you've earned that. You may have earned the right to stay stagnant at $84 billion, but you're not going to go any higher.
And I would even add to that if you don't go any higher, you're on a decline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of times it's a zero-sum game, and there's a certain market size. So anytime you're slacking, somebody else has the opportunity.
And
somebody
your salesman interacted with is going to stub their toe, and they're going to go on Reddit or they're going to go on Yelp or G2, and they're going to leave a review. And your competitors, who hire copywriters like me to do those audits and to see what's being said are going to take that and they're going to say, hey, how can we do better than this billion-dollar conglomerate? We see that their salesmen are very predatory with their tactics and they don't personalize anything. They don't take the time. That's really all we need to do is improve our tactics there. And now you've taken essentially multiple customers that could have been theirs away because you skipped out on the basics. You thought you were too big for them.
And let's shift gears a bit and talk about the buying process today. I saw some reports a while back, about 10 months ago, where it says that a lot of the buying today is done outside of the meetings, meaning that the buyer does all the research on their own with all the available data that they have. And then once they're basically decided, and by the way, this is not just the technical piece of it, it's also how does it fit into my infrastructure, how does it fit into other tools, and also who is the company, what do they stand for, who are the individuals that are running the company. So that is also important to the buyers. And so there's the last mile, the last 20% of the kind of the buying process is where they potentially reach out after they've already made a decision. Basically, it's just that they want maybe some pricing and they have some other technical questions, but they're already bought into the product.
Yeah.
How does that, and again, you can agree or disagree, how does it affect or should affect the kind of the marketing and sales that's done today?
I absolutely agree. And I like that you mentioned the 20% there because I tell people they need to come to you at a minimum of 80% already have made the decision, right? Your copy, the messaging that you're conveying, whether in your emails, on your website, it should answer almost all of those questions they have. And you'll know what those are because if you're gathering the data and you're actually collecting that and archiving it and seeing what previous customers and prospects are asking, then, hey, majority of customers are asking us about pricing. Majority of customers are asking us about our refund policy and what we can guarantee. And you go back to the messaging, you go back to the copy, and you say, hey, now we're going to implement that in there. Say you put in, hey, this is our pricing. It's going to cost you X amount of dollars. And then what's going to happen? The customer is going to come, okay, what if we only want this part of your service? Can we cut down the price? Okay, now we know that's a valid concern for buyers, and we're going to incorporate that. And so the closer, I absolutely agree, the closer you can get that person down that line with your content before they even get on that call, the more likely that they're going to buy. And I think that call really is best served to sit down with them, actually hear what they have to say, and then say, yes, we can help you. Or like I said earlier, say, no, right now we're not a good fit for you. We're not a good fit for your budget. We're not a good fit for what you're trying to do. Here's somebody that we know that you can work with, and then come back to us later on. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that as we collect the data, as we market, we continuously shift that copy and that messaging to get them to as close to 100% as possible on being sold before they even get on that call with that salesman.
And what about this whole notion of, since a lot of these vendors, they're selling, relatively speaking, high ticket items.
Mm-hmm.
So they're between, I would say, 25,000 to, I would say, 200,000 or 250,000 per year on the high end.
Yeah.
And it's the long tail, meaning they do not necessarily have to have a mailing list with 50,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
They can double the numbers with buyers, or the correct buyers and the DNA of a buyer in a mailing list that become champions, and then they go back and then sell this internally and then buy the product. So how do we measure that? Because a lot of times I think marketers and executives get enamored by numbers of what's your subscriber list? What is your YouTube viewership? How many clicks? How many, and so on. But it's faulty to think about, because a lot of these companies I would even beg to differ and say they can double the number by having 5 individuals agree to what you just said in a YouTube video or in a copyright.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I would tell you, how many vendors do you go to that are selling a high ticket item and you go to a pricing page or you go to a product page and the answer to your question is reach out for details or reach out to the sales rep. You don't have to, it may be adjustable. It may not be a static price depending on what the consumer needs, but you can throw a ballpark in there. You can say, hey, typically you can expect to pay between $5,000 to $50,000. I mean, that's a big range, but putting something in there to lock them in and say, hey, this is worth me pursuing further and getting on that email list and getting more information versus leaving it intentionally ambiguous and saying, hey, get on. Maybe it's for you, but you'll have to reach out and get on our list to find out. And an email list of 30 customers who are wanting to buy is 10 times more valuable than 300 who are just there to throw you into read later bin or just delete it altogether. I write my emails, for example. I don't write them with the intent to bring more people into my list. People who want to get on my list and get my copywriting advice, they're there. I write my emails with the intent to get the unsubs from the people that came, who opted in because it sounded good, who didn't follow the instructions that I clearly articulate on my page. They came in because it was flashy and it looked good, and they get there and they're like mind blown. Either the stories are wazoo or it's just the way I talk is just not how they want it. And so I go on every day and I'm like, did I get any unsubs today? Who unsubscribed? I'm not concerned with those ones coming in because the ones who get the value of it, I very well articulate to them. This is what you're going to get. If you want to hire me, this is how much it's going to cost you. And that scares away all the ones who don't. A company, they don't need a 50,000 subscriber list. They're selling a product that's one customer, the lifetime value is $250,000 for this product. Why do you need 50,000 people if you've got 50 that are willing to buy that you've moved them? Like
Zachary, but that's not the case. I'm telling you, like you go onto a marketer convention and it's like, oh, you should reach out to this influencer and you should reach out to that influencer. They have 50,000 subscribers. Mm-hmm. And out of the 50,000, they may have 50 that are even closely related to their potential buyers because it's either they have a niche product with a niche marketplace, have very specific requirements, and then a budget that's out of whack for most buyers. But they will go out and spend the money on marketing and advertisement with that quote-unquote influencer with 50,000 or 100,000 subscribers, and then don't go out and reach out to the person who has 300 or 500 of the correct buyer's persona. And again, there's no difference between that and MQL, scanning 50,000 badges in RSA for people that are completely useless to the buyer journey.
Yeah, that's largely a vanity metric, I think. We scanned 50,000 prospects at RSA, but how many of those, what's their level of awareness? Are they product aware? Are they solution aware? How are you targeting messaging to actually turn those 50,000 into a paying, not just a paying, but a loyal paying customer? Because you cast a wide net and you bring in 50,000 customers and majority of them buy. But what happens when all of them are not happy because they weren't the right customer and they churn? Now it's even more costly to deal with all these churning customers and acquire new ones to make up the difference than it would have been to just market right in the first place, not worry about the vanity metrics, not worry about badging them in. Like, I think the best vendors I saw when I went to TechNet down in Augusta, we'd go up and they'd say, yeah, here's your swag. You can have it. Let's talk. And I would talk and they wouldn't scan my badge. They were like, no, we're not the right fit. You probably want to go down a couple booths and talk to somebody over there. And that was like, okay, yeah, no, I don't have an email coming in yeah.
It takes a certain level of maturity, Zachary, to be able to just say no.
But it's like but what's funny, the ironic humor in it is the same people who are focused on that MQL, on scanning in those 50,000 people, are the same ones who are saying cybersecurity marketing is so hard. We can't sell anything. We can't communicate. It's because you can't even get the basics right. the basics of, like you said, sales 101, of the communicating and having that narrowed down before you even get on the call, marketing 101, of actually being a person. People buy from people, going out there, interacting face to face and saying, yes, you need it, or no, we can't help you right now. And, that doesn't mean that the marketing is dead or that it's just too difficult. It's just you got off on the wrong foot and now you're fighting uphill.
And speaking of that, be able to tailor certain copyright messaging, you're big into data and data-driven analytics when you take the time to research. Can you describe a bit about that process? What do you mean by that? I know you're a big proponent into looking at the data.
Yeah.
So how does that affect the end result?
So my process is 3 parts. The first part is the research and discovery phase, and it makes up at a minimum 50% of my actual job. I'd say 10% or even less than that, if I'm getting on the extreme side, is actually writing and doing any of that. That research and discovery phase, I usually sit down and we're looking at it depends on the project. Let's look at a company wants me to optimize their website, the messaging that's on there. Okay, let's look. Are you using heat maps? Are we seeing what's your bounce rate? What's your click-through rate? And gathering that data and then starting with that. Because ultimately, if you start at ground zero, we have no way of knowing, hey, this is measurable. This is where we're at, and this is what they're responding to and how we can improve it. And so I gather that data up front with the surveys, with the interviews. I do reach out. I do a lot of customer interviews, the heat maps, and things like that. And then we get into actually writing the content. And then once we write that content, we launch. The final part of my process is you have to split test. You have to put it out there. You have to have enough time to gather that data and improve the content. A lot of business owners...
Split test meaning, Zachary, like A/B testing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a lot of owners, they want to launch that content out there. And then within the week, it's, hey, I'm not seeing any positive results. And so you got to let it sit for a bit. And my benchmark is typically a minimum of 150 conversions, or between 45 to 60 days. And then going back, looking at the data again that we pulled starting this project, looking at how the numbers changed and saying, hey, they responded to this, they liked this, so let's go in on that. And it gets a little bit hairy when you deal with vendors who get the messaging, who get the content, and they read it, and they're like, we don't like this. We don't like how this sounds. And it doesn't matter what you like. It matters what the buyer wants to see. And that's how we get sucked back into that whole user persona thing, where it's like you're writing a persona based on your own biases. You're writing it based on what you think. And that's why you hired me. You hired me to go to your customers, to ask them, hey, what resonates with you, and then convert that into your copy. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to do that, and you're going to see that it boosts your ROI. And if it doesn't, then there's other underlying issues. You got to look at the value of your product, things like that, and see if maybe something else, maybe the problem isn't your messaging, maybe it's not your copy, maybe it's just you don't have an offer that is really valuable to the customer.
Yeah, and I think you just described the impatience in terms of seeing, they think, okay, we're dealing with human beings, but yet it's almost like they want to do action and reaction. They send this out and then boom, like I have 5 POCs starting next week because of like an email blast.
Yeah.
And also you mentioned that the overuse of jargon. There's also one thing I've seen is that the copyright of the different companies, they all look the same. It's almost like you can actually rebrand some of these white papers, some of the brochures, and you put a different logo on top and you compare that to someone else. They almost no difference, almost like the Coke and Pepsi test. Very difficult to differentiate. Is that because marketers and copywriters, maybe not you, but others are, and I think it's even more pronounced with ChatGPT, as you can see that some of these copywriters been ChatGPT-esque. And so it looks exactly the same, and it's really diminishes the whole value of even creating this type of content.
Yeah, and the issue with it is 100% they're looking at those competitors and they're saying, hey, what are they saying? What do they have up on their banner? And that looks good. So let's go ahead and try that and see if we can compete, or let's tweak it a little bit, keep those same buzzwords in there, tweak it to our tone and launch it. And the issue is you didn't go to the customer and ask them what resonates with you. You looked at a competitor who you don't know what they're doing. They could be puffing up their vanity metrics, those MQLs, say they're scanning 50,000 people in. That doesn't mean they're successful. That doesn't mean that copy is successful. But you're taking the easy route and you're looking at it and you're doing a quick competitor analysis, saying, let's throw that up, let's pull everybody, let's change the colors up, let's throw up something flashy, and we'll have that success. It's the same thing with, like we talked about with all the marketing heads on LinkedIn. Is, hey, here's the strategy I use to land X amount of clients in 10 days. If you follow, this is going to happen to you. And that's not true. Nobody's going to be able to follow your framework to the T and see the same results unless they're doing unless they're you, right? And that's the same thing with vendors. One company launches it, they use a nifty buzzword that's floating around out there, and then the other vendors look at it and say, hey, this would be easier to just, let's test this rather than do the little bit of legwork we need to do to talk to the customer and you could talk to one customer who is going to convert and take their input, throw that up on the banner. And I guarantee you're going to get 50 other people are going to see that and be like, that's exactly what I was thinking. You met me right where I was thinking. And it doesn't need buzzwords. It doesn't need jargon. It just needs to solve that problem. And as long as you can do that, those customers are going to come over and they're not going to just scan their badges. They're going to say, hey, you spoke to me. You met me where I was already at without me having to even communicate it. And now I want to work with you.
And then the other pieces that I'd like to touch upon is the misuse of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yeah.
Every time you're laughing because it's true. Every time there's an incident, if something hit the news, you have all these Me Too's, vendors saying, we solved this too, and they would have had our system, then nothing would have happened. Any comments on that?
Yeah, so I very much love FUD. But the problem is vendors do not use the right kind of FUD, right? They come out here with this, hey, if you don't hire us, you're going to be the next Change Healthcare. You're going to be the next Home Depot. You're going to be don't be the next giant data breach, right? There has to be some level of fear in this industry. But the problem with vendors is they don't follow it with the empathy and the solution. They lean really heavy on that scary story. People like fear. Why do you think Stephen King and Dean Koontz sell millions of novels? People like being scared.
Two of my favorite authors, by the way.
Yeah, and I actually do. I talk about writing like Dean Koontz and writing like Stephen King in your copywriting and in your storytelling. But people like it. That's a very strong emotion. And if it's not done in a predatory way to sit here and make you feel. That's the thing with Dean Koontz, right? Since we're talking Dean Koontz, Stephen King stories, they typically leave you feeling uncomfortable. And you're like, I don't really like the way this ended. Whereas Dean Koontz, one, he's very good at getting straight into the action up front. But typically his stories end on a positive, uplifting note. And that's where the FUD goes wrong. They miss that uplifting note. They miss, one, targeting the FUD. Like, one thing that scares a startup who's 2 years in and they're scared about losing VC funding is not going to scare a conglomerate that is making billions of dollars. I don't know if it was I think it was Change Healthcare, but if you looked the day that they had their breach, their stock prices went up. That CEO is not scared of the same FUD that you're targeting that startup with, right? So you can't launch some generic scare tactic and be like, hey, don't be the next insert company here. Maybe
it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah. Maybe my tech stack is not vulnerable to the vulnerability that you're preaching at me about. Now it just looks like you're trying to scare me, and I've already hardened my stack. I know that I'm not vulnerable to that specific attack, and so it's just a waste of time. Yeah, so FUD is definitely effective. I differ from a lot of marketers in this space in that I do appreciate it and I do employ it. However, like I said, it has to be targeted, very targeted, and it has to provide an empathetic response to ease the pain. can't just leave them on that fear. You got to say, hey, here's the specific attack and here's how we can stop it for you.
So no cliffhangers on your mailing list.
No, I do. I leave some cliffhangers if I'm getting those daily ones. And I don't ever advocate, like I tell people, like, yeah, I wouldn't write emails as a vendor the way I write emails to my list. But definitely when you're sending out those emails, if you're going to use the FUD in an attempt to get that sale or get that call, it doesn't have to be some just elaborate story. It can be, hey, like, we know that your company, coming from interacting with you, we know that you guys are facing this vulnerability. This is what's happening with it. Here's how it's growing in the world. Here's how it's evolving. And here's what we've done to, and not, hey, here's what we can do to stop it for you, because maybe you can't stop it, but here's what we've done to improve defenses and protect organizations. And then put that power back on the prospect to say, yeah, that sounds good. We want to make the decision if you're right for us. Don't insult my intelligence. Tell me that you're the right solution for me. You're not working for me. You don't know my stack. You don't know what I'm dealing with. Don't insult me and tell me that you're the right solution with your content. Just present the opportunity and let me make the choice. And so, yeah, use the FUD, but you got to use it responsibly, and you got to make sure it's done the right way, or you're gonna be the talking point of many a CISO slackering.
Is the issue is that potentially that our industry is just too boring? Meaning there's so much we can talk about malware and CVEs, and it doesn't really rock the boats for anybody. I don't necessarily, maybe they're hardcore geeks.
Yeah, 100%. And I saw a post on LinkedIn today by a B2B marketer who he was commenting on I don't know if you've seen the recent Canva rap video that came out that everybody's talking about and how cringy it is. And that's for Canva Enterprise. And yeah, everybody's got their opinions on it. I think it did great. It's disruptive marketing. People are talking about it. So I guarantee more people know about. I didn't know anything about Canva Enterprise until I saw somebody roast it. But somebody posted up about B2B marketing needs to be boring. Like, you got this B2C brain rot in here where it's like, we're talking people to people. We got to have that brand voice. We got to be the liquid death of B2B marketing. We have to just be so crazy and have all this personality. And in a sense, yeah, you don't necessarily need that level of personality like you do in a B2C brand. But like I sent in my email today, do you know how many sleepless nights I spent doing vendor comparisons for the boss? And I wish there was just some personality in there to break up the monotony of it. Just give me something. You don't have to come at me with a crazy story. You don't have to come at me with flashy lights and rap videos and things like that, but you don't have to be boring. Like,
what about Zachary throwing a meme here and there?
Yeah, it can work. Yeah, depending on the audience. I think memes definitely work. I don't include them in mine just because I'm very much on the text-based only emails in my list, but I definitely see a lot of memes and things like that go. They're memorable, right? And like, regardless of whether you like it or not, when it comes to your email, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, you remember that funny GIF or that funny meme, and you start talking about it, and that starts generating attention. I mean, you saw when Apple released their ad for the iPad a few weeks ago, and everybody's losing their minds over them smashing all this stuff, and it's like, it's great because you know what? The one target audience that they wanted to reach probably looked at that and said, this is great. I want that iPad now. And the rest, who were not the right audience, they're over here complaining about it. But while they're complaining about it, they're generating all of this tension for Apple. So, yeah, I definitely think
they stopped blending. Exactly, they stopped blending. Remember, for a while there was all the rage was blending iPhones. They put the iPhone into a blender and see how long it takes to disintegrate.
Yeah, I think that people just want to have an opinion on it now. And it's I think the biggest problem that came out of that is Apple turned around and apologized. They're like, we're sorry we did this. We're sorry we offended you. Don't be sorry that you offended guess what? The people that you offended, 98% of them are probably still going to buy your iPad. But the people who didn't necessarily know that you have the thinnest device that can crush all these things. I took graphic design classes. I went to music production school. It's thousands upon thousands of dollars to have all that equipment. So to tell me that you can smash all that into one device and make it accessible for me to practice my art, my creativity, 100% sold. So I definitely think if the vendor stops looking at, hey, we need to write something, be it an email or a website to target this general populace and say, hey, we're going to target that 30 to 35% block that we know is our perfect target customer. The rest might not like it, but they're not there to buy anyways. They can go to the competition. They can go get on that 50,000 badge list at RSA and get those spammy emails. But for us, we're communicating a value, and it's got value and people buy it.
Speaking of value, we are running out of time. I haven't even got to any of the questions I wanted to ask you, to be honest with you. I think we should do another session, and maybe I would love to dissect we maybe obfuscate, we'll take a couple like copyrighted emails, maybe obfuscate who the vendors are, and then dissect and what they did well, what they did not do well. But before we go there, what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you to know more, maybe sign up for the newsletter? And then I would, again, just speaking of value, who are the ideal customers for you specifically? Who do you like to work with? And who are these customers that will get the most out of what you can offer?
Yeah, the customers that would get the most from me are cybersecurity business owners and even tech business owners that want to make money with their copy. I do have that disclaimer on my newsletter sign up that if you're any industry outside of that, you could probably apply my principles to your copywriting, but you're not gonna want to hear what I have to say. And so I'm very adamant about keeping them off my list. So if you come into my list and you're a life coach and you sign up and I find out, I'll probably remove you from the list. And not because I have anything against you, but because there are better copywriters out there for you to follow. I'm not it. I'm active on LinkedIn, and I'm very active in my email list. My email, you can get it at zacharyhydewriter.com. And then you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm pretty quick to respond to folks. I harp on personal interaction in this industry, and I'm very receptive to people reaching out, and I do communicate. I don't give it all away. I won't give away my secrets. You got to actually hire me to get those, but my emails are definitely going out daily to help vendors and give them little quick wins here and there. And like I said, go on LinkedIn and follow me there.
Fantastic. Zachary, thank you very much for taking the time to chat today. Much appreciated. And I will follow up on, as I mentioned to you, I have a bunch of stuff that I wanted to ask you, and then maybe we'll do like live dissection of copy. And again, you don't have to give it all away, but maybe show some glimpse into what you can offer. And then again, it's all about value. So again, thank you very much for joining me today. Thanks all for joined. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Take care. Thank you again.